Hello, everybody, and thank you for sticking around. So, before we get started, my name is Camille Enanidi Esquire. I am an international music lawyer between Lagos, Nigeria, and here in New York. I'm an associate attorney at the law offices of Robert A. Celestin here, as well in New York, and I've had the honor of working with the leading voices in Afrobeats and global music. So I've seen basically firsthand how music, art, storytelling connect us in ways that politics and borders cannot. But I've also seen how those connections can be flattened when equity and representation are not prioritized. So that's why this conversation is very important today. And I could not have asked for a better group of voices to explore these questions with. So I don't know, I'll introduce you guys and you guys can kind of build on that. So to my right, I have Chika Uwaze. She is a writer, strategic co-founder of Afropolitan, building a global digital nation for Africans worldwide. And then to her left, I have Abdul Karim Abdullah, the founder and CEO of Culture Management Group, the visionary behind Afrofuture Festival, and a leader in Africa's cultural economy. And last, we have Mr. Shola Oke, the managing director of Pernod Ricard Africa, driving operations across more than 20 countries while championing responsible consumption and cultural relevance. So together here, we represent a blend of law, strategy, culture, business. And today, my role here is very simple. We're gonna guide this dialogue, so we're not just talking about creativity, we're actually talking about how it can be leveraged as a bridge between the diaspora. So let's begin. So I'm gonna ground us in storytelling and digital identity. So Chika, with your work with Afropolitan, it's literally about building digital nation across diaspora. So how are artists and creators using spaces and storytelling to connect Black experiences across continents? And then, what role does digital access, or sometimes the lack thereof, play in connecting diasporic communities?
Yeah, so we started our podcast, the Afropolitan podcast, in March. And it has grown like crazy. It is one of the fastest growing African podcasts. And one of the things that I'm realizing is how important our narrative is globally. I think as much as we feel like we're putting information out there, Afrobeats is on the map, Nollywood is out there, we feel like all these touch points are out there, but you'll be shocked how many people still don't understand there are experts in Africa. There are people who are doing private equity, they're in law, they're doing different things around creativity, film directors, and every single time we put an episode out, the feedback of, I didn't know these type of people existed, I didn't know they were doing this type of work, and even opportunities have happened. So for example, one of our, it was our fastest growing episode, another one has beat it, but it was Dio, and he actually produced the concerts for Ashake, Burna Boy, and Rema. And he just was telling the stories, the challenges of building concerts out in Nigeria. And the founder of ASOS reached out to him on LinkedIn because of that episode. He said, hey, I'm coming to Nigeria. I saw your episode on Afropolitan. I want to connect with you. And a lot more of those things are happening. And so our job is really just to share that narrative so that those in the diaspora, even those that are not in the diaspora, are able to connect with these thought leaders.
Absolutely, and that's it. That is like creating that bridge, and I think that what you guys created is just amazing. Like, I'm a huge fan, and I think it's really great. So I think Chika really just highlighted the digital identity layer, but like let's also now shift it now into the physical. So like festivals, culture, shared experience. So Abdul, Afrofuture has become a cultural global landmark, bringing together not just music, but food, fashion, and community. So from your perspective, what are the biggest opportunities and challenges working across borders, and how do you see festivals like yours serving as a bridge to diaspora?
Yeah, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you all, and thank you for the question. I mean, I think, the first step for us is I love Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're all achieving, we're all heading towards self-actualization. And the reality for black people is that we're not a monolith. We speak completely different languages. We have different experiences, and the distortions or the lack of storytelling that exists do not allow us to be able to have a very good understanding of each other. So the spaces that we create around our festival are spaces that allow for us to find commonality, find areas of shared experiences, shared joy, shared heritage, and that's what we hope to be able to do with the spaces that we create, whether it's around food, whether it's around art, around fashion, and definitely around music. One of the things that I love to talk about is how music allows you to travel without a visa. If somebody's here playing steel pans, you'll be transported directly to the Caribbean. And we want to be able to, do the same thing as Afrobeats right now is penetrating the music. But there's a lot of stories and depth to these artists that we don't yet know. And the things that Chica is doing with the Afropolitan and telling stories around some of these producers, some of this historical knowledge, one, it allows us to be able to educate a generation. And with the internet penetration, not only is the world connecting us to the diaspora, it's connecting us to our fellow Africans. Because even though we live within the same continent, there's so many of us that have hardly any knowledge about these experiences. And the only way for us to be able to build the next generation in a direction that builds on the legacy of things that we're creating is for us to be informed, not only within our own communities, but within the greater diaspora. And the hope is that would allow us to be able to be ready for the changes that are coming as the continent is continuing to be younger and it continues to be, 1 in 4 people in the next, 30 years are going to be from the continent. So are we ready for that? Are we ready to create the infrastructure to ensure that we meet that moment? So that's what we're looking at.
Actually, I want to add a note with what you said, because this thing of our music traveling without a visa is so key, because someone we interviewed, Chopsticks, right? So he is most known for producing Last Last with Burna Boy. So what he told us on the podcast was that he has never been to America and he won a Grammy, right? So it's important to understand his work is being impacted even without leaving. And he was just saying I just got a call from Rick Ross. We're about to do a next song. So these are really important that people are able to even earn Forex and being in Nigeria or in different parts of Africa.
Yeah, and as you said, I see that all the time in music. We have, besides, these are some of the challenges that come up. Visa issues, I think we've seen that recently in not only African music, but also Latin music. People are canceling their tours because they can't get a visa to come. So I think those are definitely some of the challenges that we see. But also, how do we overcome those challenges? What do we do to continue that cultural continuity, even though these issues persist? I think that's something that's important to, as we're having this conversation, figure out, how do we overcome these challenges, not just understanding them, but overcoming them.
I mean, from our perspective, and what we've been doing is continue to build within our space. We exported our festival out of Ghana, and that's a big deal. You know what I mean? For us to take a property that was born and bred in Ghana, that invited people from the diaspora to Ghana, and bring it to Detroit, Michigan, in the Midwest, not to the East Coast, not to New York City, Atlanta, D.C. We took it to Detroit just to connect to that community in Detroit, and it was highly successful for us doing that. And despite all the challenges, right, it's our job to show up and to keep doing it no matter how hard it gets. And really, that's the ethos that we've taken, and the hope is that would allow the next generation to be even more audacious than we have been in the work that we've been doing.
Yeah, and I think we all need to work together, and I think collaboration is key here. So I guess talking about the role of businesses and institutions. So Shola, you oversee operations in more than 20 countries, and you've seen how brands can kind of shape the culture. So how do you see companies supporting equitable partnerships across Africa and the diaspora?
I think you kind of talked about it. It's all about collaboration and partnerships. So with everybody on this panel, and I didn't even know we were working with most of them. So, but the way if you think about Africa and the continent, right? One of the things that we need to do, and when you talk about music traveling without a visa, it's exactly that. We need to break down the borders in terms of this continent. If you think about Africans in diaspora, there's 250 million Africans in the diaspora, if you didn't know. And if we were a country, we'll be the 5th largest country in the world. So what does that tell you? The ability for us to take our culture, our stories across the continent, and the power that we have, we can leverage. And I think it's using that power, and you were talking about taking it from Accra to, Atlanta?
To Detroit.
To Detroit, sorry. That's the power that we've got, because we've got people across the entire continent. And what businesses need to do and need to understand is, who do we partner with to be able to reach those consumers? And as we are consumer-centric, it's all about what is the consumer looking for, and how do we engage? And we all talk about being culturally relevant. And the question is, what does that mean? Our job is not to define culture, but to be a catalyst in terms of how we engage with our consumers, and we find the right partnerships to be there. If Gen Z is going to go for Afropolitan, I want to be there. But I need to understand how I'm going to be there that will be relevant to that consumer. Yeah.
So I guess, how do we structure those collaborations so they're sustainable, so they're not just, like you said, one-off cultural moments in time? How do we structure these kind of collaborations so we build sustainability in, this voice that we're building for ourselves?
Yeah. It's with partnerships and collaborations, it's thinking long-term. A lot of the times, brands, we're looking for the ROI. If my P&L is not adding up, I don't want to do it. But what that means is you don't have enough time to sustain that partnership. You don't have enough time for the partnership to be impactful. At the end of the day, it's about impactful partnerships. So I'll use an example. A brand like Martell, and we've got, anybody heard of Davido? Yep. Hey, David. I made you look. So we've got a partnership with Davido, right? And a lot of brands have partnerships with influencers. But what we do differently is the longer term impact of that partnership. It's not doing a partnership for 6 months and then you walk away. First, the consumer hasn't even had time to understand why you have that partnership. The consumer hasn't even had time to understand, why Davido versus Martell, or why Afropolitan and something else, So longer term consistency in those collaborations, in those relationships. And I think one of the most critical things is both of you, whatever the partnership or relationship, having clarity in terms of what your objective is. And it has to be joint.
Yeah, can I add to that? We started partnering with Martell in the pandemic. This is 2020, and I know a lot of people now love Amapiano music. You're a big fan maybe of Uncle Waffles or Musa Keys or any of that. Martell, because of Martell, these guys are world superstars. And the reason why I would say that is they enabled a program we did called Amapiano and Brunch, where these artists could not perform in South Africa because of the COVID rules. The only place they could come to was Ghana. And we were giving them a platform in Ghana to blow up, right? So whether it's Uncle Waffles, whether it's DJ Heavy, or whether it's Musa Keys, a lot of them, their first ever international shows were in Accra, Ghana, and then to Lagos, to London and Lagos, and so on and so forth. And that was because the brand enabled an experience in the country that allowed for the propelling of that partnership. But I think that from a deeper point of view, on the continent where resources are a lot less, I tend to talk about EMEA. The A is silent. The A standing for Africa is silent because we hardly see it in the budget. But brands that actually invest in these experiences allow for our creativity to be able to shine, because it's very rare that locals are able to kind of get it. Whereas here, there's huge marketing budget, whether it's here or Europe. That's not necessarily the same thing for us on the continent, right? There's normally like a tie-in, whether to sales and things of that nature, but because of that partnership that was mutually beneficial to us and Martell, the brand in Ghana, we were able to impact an entire genre of music. And I think that that's the power of these type of symbiotic partnerships.
Maybe just to talking about budgets. You know, one of the things, especially for global brands, and you talk about, you know, the A being silent, a lot of brands now, a lot of businesses, Africa has risen. We're not rising, we have risen. And somebody was talking about being woke, we're awake as a continent, right? And the tides are changing. The way we were doing business before is changing because there's a lot of Africans that have a lot more clarity. For businesses, the rest of the world, you know, is a bit more difficult. And people are now moving to Africa to understand that that's where the opportunity is. That's where the potential is. So if you want to be successful in the future, you have to invest in Africa. So a lot of brands are actually beginning to invest a lot more in Africa. The challenges we used to have in the past is because, you know, we are global companies, you have to define, you want to do a one-size-fits-all. And that's usually very difficult because your advertising, your platforms, you want something that's going to transcend across the entire continent. But back in the day, and I say back in the day, Africa wasn't in the consideration because people didn't feel there was a market in Africa. But with things like Afro beats, we are now influencing the rest of the world. So beyond Afro beats, I mean, Amapiano is the same, you know, our fashion is the same now, jollof rice is the same, you know. So we are influencing the continent. So a lot of people and a lot of brands are beginning to think about the continent. And, you know, earlier today, somebody was talking about content creation. So it's not about creating those global ads anymore. It's, you know, partnering with people where the localization of the brand and the connection to people on the continent is becoming more real. And I don't need a global ad for me to be able to connect to those consumers anymore, you know? And the channels are changing as well. Yeah. I don't need a big ad. I need the right, you know, social media channel or digital channel to be able to influence the many now.
So you touched on a few things that I wanted to comment on, and I think back in maybe 2019, 2020, especially in the music industry, a lot of record labels were coming out to West Africa, you know, investing a lot of money. But what's happening now is that we're seeing that there are these additional challenges where, you know, the cost of maybe to make a music video is $30,000, or, you know, they can't even bring the artist to the studio in America to let them record. Or, for example, you know, people, they're not streaming as much because most of West Africa doesn't have access to a smartphone, you know, compared to the numbers, right? Yeah. But so these are the challenges that I think we see. And then, again, a lot of labels are now pulling out and leaving the market. So now, again, it's going back to creating sustainability. You know, how do we get these businesses to see the value in Africa as a whole?
I mean, you know, first and foremost, I don't agree with the premise from the label's perspective. Because I'm a firm believer, there's a lot of money on the continent, to be fair. The reality is, are the businesses interested in building the infrastructure with us? Yeah. And the answer to that is a big fat no, right? So that's clear, whether it's, you know, Amazon coming in and leaving after 2 years, or Netflix you know, moving, Prime, or any of these brands or any of the labels. When you think about the music, Afrobeats is probably the #1 genre in music right now, but when you look at it, the money stays outside of America. Almost 90% of the money, it stays out of Africa because we don't have the infrastructure, right? So there's no point in, the industry is hard to sustain without the infrastructure, without us being able to own the IP, right? It's definitely not something that we can do. And also, when you think about labels, they're not in the business of, I guess, what is the word, developing talent anymore. So if you're not already made, as in you're not that talent that's already going crazy on TikTok, the chances are, you know, it probably doesn't make sense to them at this point. And the reality is, on the ground, a lot of these talents that are getting these deals or were getting these deals are people that need the money. I mean, it goes back to the hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy of need. Somebody from the village that you showing them $50,000, they're gonna take it because that's probably more money than their family has ever seen. And it doesn't matter to them what type of abuse it is that they're gonna learn maybe 2-3 years down the line. What they need is the money right now, right? And what we need to do as people within this space, whether it's Afropolitan building what they're building, Afrofuture building what it is, or a Native or OB's house, or we need to just kind of figure out a way for us to structure ourselves where we can create these toll bridges. And her husband, Eche, loves to say, we need to put it in a toll bridge because I do think that we need to be able to build our own infrastructure if we want to be able to see it. But that comes along with storytelling, that comes along with collaboration and cooperation and a long-term vision so that we can create a space where we can, support our rising and aspiring talent.
And let me add as well that I think what's going to be important for everyone here in the audience, right, because you are part of the diaspora, is to support these creators, right? It is simply watching their videos, liking, engaging, right? One of the key things we were talking about with our strategy with YouTube, for example, one of the most interesting phenomenons I've seen is that we're all begging for Netflix and Amazon and other streaming platforms to give us money to produce. People don't know that quietly across West Africa specifically, the biggest Nollywood movies are happening right there on YouTube, right? Yep. And they're probably spending a couple $1,000s to produce, and they're getting easily $20,000 to $30,000 a month. Right? They drop a video and literally they're getting millions of views that day, right? And there's been many viral Nollywood movies all based off of YouTube. And a lot of that money they're getting is from the diaspora watching. I always say, like when I go home, go to Houston to visit my mother-in-law, literally always in the back of her in the TV is her playing some Nollywood video from YouTube, right? My mom is doing the same thing. And I know for us with Afropolitan, that's a huge part of our strategy is we are filming right here in Lagos. People don't even realize it's in Lagos. Half the time people are like, where are you filming this? Like, where's your studio? I'm like, it's right here in my home in Lagos, right? But it's gonna be people like you who are supporting and engaging and watching us that are gonna help us win so that we're not so reliant on brands that don't have the dollar, are not looking to invest in us. And even what he's doing, right? I mean, he did something that is amazing, right? He was able to do it. 20,000 people showed up at Afrofuture Festival in Detroit, okay? Right? We don't have that's a huge moment, right? And so people flying in, coming, supporting, going to this event in Detroit, that's gonna be important as well. And last thing I would say is he's, represent Pinard Ricard, right? There's a portfolio of drinks under his label, and us drinking it here, drinking it back home, like these are all ways we can support so more brands realize that there's value in the diaspora. And I think India and China has done a very good job of that. They've shown the value of their diaspora right here in the US. We have to do the same for Africa.
It's a very good point in terms of the power of the diaspora, because we're Africans, and maybe just to put a sense to it, a lot of the economies in Africa are driven by remittances, believe it or not. It's the $10 you send home or the $100 you send home. It's very impactful for our economies, right? And we never realized how big this was until, devaluation struck Nigeria a couple of years ago. And, I think also during COVID, those remittances dipped because people couldn't send money home. So the power of the diaspora is bigger than you think. The impact that we have, if it's in Atlanta, for example, Nigerians that live in Atlanta, Nigerians that live in Texas, for example. And now I'm hearing, with brands like ours, because certain brands are big in Africa, right? But the diaspora is exporting those brands, and those are the brands that they're engaging in, And just speaking of that, the power of the diaspora, but also in terms of Africa, we need to stop waiting for people to do it to us or do it for us. We need to do it for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to, like you were saying, the Netflix conversations and people live in the continent, because again, the reason why big corporations leave is Africa is a difficult continent to do business in. It's not easy, right? But when you get it right, it's a very impactful and also profitable continent to be in. You know, you were talking about the internet. Internet penetration is only at 38% on the continent. So think about content creation and all of that. All the people that are now digesting that content, it's only 38% of the continent. And a continent that is, the average age is only 19. So a lot of these young people don't have the phones, are not able to consume. So the potential, the rest of the world is at 70%, which means we can double that. That's opportunity. And as a business and as a brand, that's potential. So the question is, how do I build the infrastructure? How do I engage with the government and private organizations you were talking about private partnerships and things like that. It has to do with both. The government, right policies, right energy, and businesses to not wait, but develop the continent. And that's the only way we're going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think touching even on what we said about the Netflix and all these platforms, we understand that the algorithm and all these platforms kind of are important in media. So they have so much influence. So I think we can all agree with this. Should we be building our own platforms? And what would that take?
That's a two-sided answer. It's a bit complicated. So perfect example, we interviewed Ike Eze, who runs a fund called Beta Ventures, right? And one of the things he was saying, because he's consistently evaluating technology, is that like you can't out Twitter, okay? You can't. Like everyone that's like, I'm building the Twitter for Africa, you know, there's resources and different infrastructure and things that they're able to scale, right? But I think the question is, how do we think through platforms that are unique to us, right? So for example, with Afrofuture, right? What they're doing is they're building entertainment experiences for us, because if you literally, I just actually saw this the other day, someone did a report about Coachella and was saying, I think Davido is the only African act this year. They already announced who's performing at Coachella. So for example, if you were looking for a bit of Afrobeats at Coachella, you're basically not gonna get that. So you have to go to Afrofuture, right? So like he's building his own platform in order to fill that need. We're doing it from a media perspective. Funny enough, and I love when I get this comment, is so many people say, your podcast is like the Diary of a CEO, right? And we love that because Diary of a CEO, unfortunately, he doesn't interview Africans. So if you wanna know experts, if you wanna know thought leaders, if you wanna know the person that built the first private equity firm in Nigeria, you cannot go to Diary of a CEO. You literally can only go to Afropolitan and see that type of content. So I think it's really about really reflecting on, okay, how do I build something that literally there's a gap? I'm not trying to build the next Twitter, the next Instagram, whenever, you know, because I angel invest, anytime someone comes to me, I'm like, you're not thinking. You're not thinking like fully about like the gap. And I think those are the way we build platforms for us that really fulfill our need.
And really, like, there's no point in recreating what already exists. I mean, the whole value in creating for the content is just innovation. I mean, think about it, right? Yes, we had 30% penetration, but 650 million Africans have cell phones. They may not be smartphones, but they have cell phones. That's a combined greater than the US and Europe. That tells us that we are early adapters. When you think about the continent, we just got Cash App, Zelle. People have been doing mobile money for years on the continent, right? So that tells me that they're open to adapting to technology. We just need to create what works for us, and that starts with us, right? Just kind of creating those infrastructural needs and investing in each other, supporting each other, and for us, that's what we love to do as a brand.
But it's also creating opening the doors and creating the opportunities. Because I was talking to somebody today, and it's about the smartest people in the world and the smartest countries in the world. A lot of those are driven by Africans in diaspora. So we have the knowledge, we have the understanding, right? Why aren't we using that to influence the continent, to engage the continent, to impact the continent? One of the industries in is, for example, gaming. You know, South Africa has the only data center, whatever it is, in terms of infrastructure. But gaming in Africa is a $1 billion business that nobody kind of is thinking about, because we are not connected to any of the global centers or whatever it is, right? But the opportunity and the potential is there. So how do we open that door? How do we build the infrastructure in Africa, all right? But it's not going to be for today. It's going to be for that generation tomorrow or whatever it is. But, you know, the like you were saying, the consumers are there. The numbers are telling us that this is there. And we have the people. We're the ones running all the big corporations and organizations in tech. I mean, even today, all the people that have spoken today are leading some of the biggest organizations in the world. So how are we not leveraging, you know, our positions where we are to open the doors for Africa? You know, I was talking to Dan about Unstoppable Africa, you know, and it's going to be led by us, for us, you know, and only Africans understand our problems. We can't, you know, put that on other people. Because for them, why should I stay if you know, you guys are only going to pay 1,000 naira for Netflix? It makes no sense to them. They're going to leave, right? They're running a business at the end of the day.
I mean, I agree with that point wholeheartedly, but, you know, and I agree, African solutions for African problems. But I love to give Coca-Cola as an example. I mean, if you read the story of Coca-Cola, they were importing their bottles, importing the liquid, until they realized that they had to create an African solution for their Africa problem. And now Coca-Cola is one of the oldest brands on the continent. So, you know, to Chika's point and why what they're doing with Afropolitan is so important is because my experience is that a lot of people just don't know. And I found that when I bring individuals or companies to the continent, you say, look, you can't sponsor us, okay. Just come to Ghana, come and experience what we do here. The experience completely changes their perspective. And the reality of the matter is a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. And we don't have a lot of avenues for people to have a window into what the experience is like. Because I believe that if you bring any company, managing director, CEO to Nigeria or Ghana in December or South Africa, they would want to put there and invest their money because they will see all the things that we know. Right, and I think that there is value in us supporting an Afropolitan because they are telling those stories. But we don't have, if you are someone that lives in America and you've never been to anywhere on the continent, there's no TV show or a video that you can watch to give you a window into what that experience is like. So the only true experience is you visiting. So for me, my standard of partnerships with any brand or any individual is to invite them to come, because then we are on a level playing field as far as what the value proposition is. And I'm not trying to convince you to support me. You are already convinced, you know?
But you said it, it's also about storytelling.
Yeah.
And your platforms tells the story about Africa. And you said it, it's for Coke, it's about creating the local solution. It's creating a solution for Africa. Yeah. You know, it's about brands and talking about what is culturally relevant for that brand in Africa or in that particular country at the end of the day. So I agree with you in terms of the educating them, but there are different ways versus bringing them to Africa is telling the stories, like you were saying, on your podcast, on your platforms. You know, people see why is the whole world now trying to go to Nigeria in December? They've never been. Right? But they want to go. Everybody's talking about Dirty December. We're even worried that we're going to be able to take as many people. You know, so, but it's because we've showcased it. We're talking about it. You know, there's an avenue where they've seen it, you know. So, and that's where they want to go. So, again, I agree with the sentiment of it's us creating those African solutions. But that's exactly the point. It's an African solution.
And I think the education goes both ways, right? So, like Abdul said, how do we educate the artist that's gonna sign that record deal just for the money that they're gonna feed today? So it's very important for us to also educate the creators in Africa to understand that, look, it doesn't have to be the America or diaspora way. We can make it local to us, but also build in the structures that we need. So I think that's the thing. So I think we're out of time, but I do want to ask one more question before we close. So I'd like to ask one question. I need to ask one sentence from each of you. What legacy do you hope that the next generation of Black creators inherit?
I want them to have abundance. I think for so long we're pushed for scarcity, and I want us to all have an abundant mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to, reach self-actualization, belief in themselves, belief in their community, understanding that the differences that exist between us far underweigh the amount of similarities that exist between us within the diaspora. So that self-actualization, I think, is important.
I think for me, it's there's nothing impossible if we do it together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what unity is, and that's how we do it in our day-to-day, not just, on a one-off or one type of collaboration like we said earlier. So I don't know if we have time for questions, but does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? All right. Awesome. So thank you, everybody, for joining me today. Thank you for staying around.